The continued struggle between the supremacy clause of the Constitution over who is in charge of immigration law in this country continues. We have an attorney general and a president who are intent on enforcing the immigration laws of this land, which, of course, puts them decidedly at odds of really the last, I don't know which president you have to go back to find one that actually cared about this issue rather than trying to create paths to citizenship. You have to go back to Eisenhower. I think you really have to. But California is pushing back hard. All the big cities, including, of course, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Anaheim, Pasadena, every place, are creating sanctuaries and making it official what we've long known. And the state of California is considering making the entire state a sanctuary. Yesterday, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced that local jurisdictions would have to comply with federal immigration laws before they could receive Department of Justice grants. This could be very, very costly. Let's talk about this with California State Senator Joel Anderson. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Doug, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Appreciate it. So, look, I'm a nut on this topic. I've talked about it for over 20 years, and the irony is that I feel that if we had been allowed to have an honest conversation in the state of California and here in Southern California on the issue of immigration, and really nationally, had we been allowed to address the most egregious problems, Donald Trump wouldn't have ever been president because they would have taken off the table one of the animating issues of the 2016 presidential race. But we've been having a fake conversation on this because those who believe that border enforcement and the sovereignty of America is significant have been silenced and shouted down as xenophobes or racists.
Oh, I think you're absolutely correct. And, it's fascinating to me that if I bring up this subject, the first thing people say is I'm a racist. But we have 11,661 felons that are undocumented in our prisons, murderers, rapists, and child molesters. And for them to say that none of them exist, they're simply crime deniers. And this SB 54 shields those felons and guarantees that they are returned to our community, forcing ICE to go door to door. It's absolutely outrageous, and it puts a lot of money at jeopardy needlessly.
Here's the thing that I don't understand, and I really don't understand this. Who is the constituent group that wants these protections for child molesters and murderers? And I know that this sounds like we're being hyperbolic, but we're not. We know that there are thousands, as you pointed out, thousands of people who are in the state prison system or in county who are not there because they're in the country illegally. They are there because after coming in the country illegally, they did some egregious crimes and were convicted for it. And what's worse is that we know the formula here. By the time somebody actually gets pinched and convicted and incarcerated, they have usually committed a laundry list of crimes. It's just they got caught finally.
That's right. In most of these criminals are preying on the undocumented because
Right.
they believe the undocumented are not going to turn them in. So when they return to those communities, those child molesters are going to go after dreamers. And, I've had a lot of folks come to me who are just outraged over this bill, and they're on both sides of the issues. We're not talking about whether dreamers should stay or should go. And there's a strong argument you could say that they're here to improve their lives. And
you can't get somebody who's more hardcore on this issue than me. I believe that once we have border security, effective, not perfect, but effective border security, including internal enforcement and ports and airports, where anywhere from a fifth to a third of illegal immigration traffic comes to airports, that we must fix the DREAM Act kid situation. I don't believe in visiting the sins of the father on the son. That
right.
If a kid is carried into the country, it's not their fault. But if we can't get agreement that a child molester should be deported after they serve their sentence, then we've got no chance of fixing these other problems. If we can't at least get a concession from the left on that point.
Doug, you stole my very point. I agree with you wholeheartedly. There is no excuse. I mean, you can argue the dreamers one way or another. There is no argument for felons. There's no argument for rapists or child molesters. If you put a bomb at a school or a hospital and it doesn't go off, but you placed a bomb with the intent of harming a lot of people, SB 54 shields you from immigration. That is absolutely outrageous. So we have to wait until they perfect their bombing techniques before we deport these folks?
Well, I've always thought, we're talking with California State Senator Joel Anderson, you can follow on Twitter at Joel Anderson CA, that attempted murder is the stupidest charge in the entire lexicon of law, because you're basically rewarding someone with a lighter sentence for being a bad shot, or because the first responders are good. Because the paramedics got there quick enough, and we have now medical science that can save a life, and it rewards the criminal. When they pull the trigger, they plant the bomb. They meant to kill people, and then you compound it by excluding, by creating a separate justice system for people who entered the country illegally. This is, and not a tougher one, a lighter justice system. This is utter madness.
I agree with you completely, but you know what? Local electeds are stepping up. We talked about the big cities, but let's talk about Walnut. Let's talk about West Covina. Let's talk about San Marino. Today I'm having a press conference this afternoon in West Covina with Mayor Ching from Walnut, Mayor Spence from West Covina, and San Marino Councilman Huang. These folks are stepping up. In San Diego today, there are 5 mayors who Mayors for Safe Cities, created Mayors for Safe Cities. Bill Wells in El Cajon is leading that charge. These mayors understand on the front lines how important this public safety money is and how dangerous SB 54 is, and they're stepping up. We have a petition on my state website that people can sign, and over 36,000 people have signed it in the last 3 weeks, and we're trying to get to 100,000, so I can deliver that to President Pro Tem DeLeon and show him that Californians are deeply concerned about this policy that he's pushing with SB 54. We don't want to be a sanctuary state. We don't want to have to cut back on our deputies and police officers on the street. We don't want to put people in peril at risk of rapists and child molesters.
Yeah, but as we know, the Kevin DeLeons of the world, they just want to blame it on Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump. They think that they're the problem. They don't see that they're the problem. They don't see that the problem is local elected officials who are subverting the rule of law, and they have been. And they've been doing it for decades.
Well, we're stepping up. I mean, in the past, perhaps people haven't stood up the way we are now. But, the fact that in 3 weeks we have over 36,000 signatures, if we can absolutely get to 100,000. Rarely, if ever, has that ever happened before that we've been able to collect so many signatures in such a short period of time. I do think that even if Kevin DeLeon is deaf to hearing from the public, our governor isn't, and I think our governor will veto this bill. But we have to stand up. It can't just be elected officials. It can't be just talk show hosts.
No, it can't be. We've been gasbagging about this for 20. I'm serious. I have been gasbagging. The very first topic I ever did in talk radio was on this topic. Okay, over 20 years ago, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And we can get all worked out. People are stuck in traffic, listening to me for the 50 millionth time blab about this. But it's crunch time now. We've got to make a decision as a nation. We've got a real problem here. We either fix it or we're not going to fix it. But we've got to make a decision on what we're going to do. And one of the components has to be, and this is where it gets controversial, I personally believe we need a border barrier. I would not call it a wall, and I wouldn't build a wall, but I certainly would have a double fence that goes from the Gulf of Mexico to the Pacific Ocean. Why? Because of Kate Steinle, because of the countless other Kate Steinles who have been killed by people who have been deported previously. That's the other issue. We get people deported from the prison system, and they come back multiple times. So what kind of border security could we possibly have if a person who's been convicted of felonies, served time, deported, and then comes back to commit more crimes?
Well, and you're looking at just one. I live closer to the border, and I will tell you, one of the biggest problems we have with the border is human trafficking and drug trafficking. And without any kind of a border in place, they simply come across. And I'm tired of people taking advantage of the weak in our society. I'm tired of poor innocent girls and boys being dragged into our country to be used as sex slaves. Those people deserve better from us. And until we have that serious conversation that you're talking about, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, we have to have an adult conversation, and people have got to stop grandstanding on this issue for elections.
Well, listen, it's worse than that, because you're fighting the entire pop culture. You're fighting, and this is where my friends in the news industry don't realize how they have eroded confidence in journalism by being advocates rather than journalists. The Los Angeles Times, which is the paper of record, not just for L.A., but really for California. When somebody in the other side of the world wants California news, they go to latimes.com. That's just the reality. And when the L.A. Times only refers to immigrants as if there's no such thing as an illegal immigrant, there's just immigrants. There's no other kind of that would be, and I've used this analogy for years, it would be as if they only reported on drivers, never drunk drivers, as if there's no distinction between, there's just drivers. And it's not true. And when you run a headline like that so for a person like myself will be described as anti-immigrant rather than anti-illegal immigration. And those distinctions are vital because I absolutely believe in immigration. We are all the sons and daughters of immigrants, and it's the strength of the nation. But illegal immigration produces poverty. There's a reason why progressive, blessed California, poised on the Pacific Rim, in the 21st century, has the largest number of poor people and the highest percentage of poor people in the country. Not knuckle-dragging, barbaric Mississippi and Alabama. It's California. And because we have encouraged and facilitated the importation of massive amounts of poverty, making it much more difficult for the poor people here to get on the first rung of the ladder of success.
Wow. You're way beyond SB 54. I like everything that you're saying, but today I am laser focused on killing this bill because it's so harmful for our nation and so harmful for California. And I'd like to invite all your listeners to come to my state website, and there's a little button they can push to sign on to our petition. We need to get to 100,000. We need to do it as fast as possible, and we need to shut down SB 54 because it's not fair to the Dreamers, it's not fair to U.S. citizens, and it's not fair to our communities.
Give the web address again, too, and we'll make sure we get it on our social media.
If they just Google Joel Anderson, it pops right up, and they go to my state website, and there's a button clearly on the website that they click on, and they just put in their name and address. And we are dividing out the names based on what senator is yours, and we're sending the names to that senator. And we were also going to take it to the President Pro Tem, because this is his bill, Kevin De Leon's bill, and I'm going to show him that over 100,000 people are upset, and we rarely get that type of participation on any state bill. So I think it's going to send a strong signal, and I also think that Governor Brown is the adult in the room, and I cannot imagine him not vetoing this bill because it's so harmful. You know, they talk about President Trump or Jeff Sessions taking money away from California. They're not taking it away. That's grant money to offset the cost of immigration. If you refuse to work with ICE, I'm not saying that local government should become ICE agents. That's not what we're attempting. Every sheriff, every police chief has said they don't do immigration, but what they do is allow ICE access to the felons in their prisons and jails.
This is a very significant point you're making, because the demagogues are saying that mean old Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump are going to take money away from California. But the grant money that goes to law enforcement is to defray the costs of illegal immigration, because the feds actually, in a moment of clarity, knew that they were culpable for failing to enforce the borders. So they were subsidizing some of the extra burdens that were placed on local municipalities by giving these grants. But if you're not going to enforce the law, then why should you get the grants?
You don't qualify for the grants. So I'll give you two quick examples. In our current prison, right now in California, we have 11,661 undocumented felons that are eligible for deportation. This year, the federal government gave us a grant of $50.6 million to offset the cost of housing those felons. In some of the county jails, ICE rents space and has access to their computers to check all the felons in their jails. And that gives them the opportunity to identify who's there undocumented and allows them to deport them. The sheriffs are not deporting these folks. It's ICE agents. All they're doing is giving them access to their jails. And if you deny them that access, as SB 54 would deny them that access, then you're not eligible to apply for those grants. We're talking about well over $100 million and as much as $1 billion statewide. Now, they'll say, well, they can't cut off money to senior citizens. That's true. We're just talking about public safety money. We're not talking about if you go back to Orange County, they said the cost to them would be $22 million. $22 million. You cannot make those types of cuts without removing sheriff's deputies from the streets. You have to cut labor. There's no other way to cut $22 million out of your budget. That puts us all at risk because we'll have fewer officers, fewer deputies on the street to protect us.
The bill is SB 54 in Sacramento. Folks, get to Senator Anderson's website, sign the petition, and we'll end it on this. First of all, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the lead on this. But it's depressing and demoralizing. Look at how hard you have to work, and the citizens of this state have to work just to stop our leaders from making it worse. They're not making it better. You have to work overtime just to stop them from doing more damage. If they were doctors, if your colleagues in Sacramento, Senator, were doctors, they'd be hauled before a medical board and have their licenses to practice pulled.
I agree with you, but Doug, I got to do a shout out to you. You know, I've attempted to go to every editorial board in California. Now, to LA Times credit, they did meet with me and we had a great conversation. But if it wasn't for talk show hosts like you stepping up and having me on your show and promoting this as much as we do, people would not even know that we're going to start putting more felons in their community.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But here's the problem, and this is what's so insidious about the state that we're in. They have safely corralled this issue. They have ghettoized it into AM talk radio and to my column in the LA Daily News, and that's pretty much it. And that way they can write it off as just the rantings of right-wing white guys. And it's a tragedy because this is not an issue. It's not a racial issue. It's a sovereignty issue. And it's a false sense of humanitarianism to think that you're doing the poor a favor by encouraging more and more poor people to pour into the country, keeping the people who are already here in poverty in poverty, as they have to compete with even poorer people for the first rung on the ladder of success. And I cite this again, and this is very easy to find, Senator. It might be helpful to you. On August 4th, 1977, then-President Jimmy Carter issued a presidential paper on this very issue. I've written about it. If you just Google my name and August 4th, 1977, you'll find the quotes from Carter. It might be helpful. Thank you for coming on and talking to us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, Doug. Thank you.
All right.